a podcast in the making. TPC 144, July 23rd, 2020, 12:08 p.m. Eastern Time. Available on YouTube, BitChute, DTube, Spotify, Vimeo, and anywhere else you can find it. It's probably there. If it's not, comment and I'll get it there. Today's guest, Mr. Dwayne Hughes from Sandia National, or worked at Sandia. Introduce yourself. Don't let me butcher this.
Okay, I'll try to do that. You can tell by my costume that I'm representing the National Museum of Nuclear Science and History. That's a mouthful. We're a national museum. There are only 38 in the country, and 30 of them are in Washington, D.C. So there's only about 8 of us scattered around the rest of the country. Museum's 51 years old. We've been in 3 different sites, and we're currently in our latest site, which is 11 years. I received through the museum a list of 50 questions that you had your viewers write into you. I've reviewed those questions, and one of them came to mind, and that is, what made you get into this specific field? And so let me tell you a little bit about myself.
Sure.
And what my qualifications or unqualifications might be. I grew up in a little town near Dayton, Ohio, a town named Miamisburg, about 5,500 people. And in the late 40s, about 1947, the AEC began to build mound laboratories. It was on a hill right above the town there, in Limestone Hill, and they mined it out. I mentioned that the town is 5,500 people. There were 5,500 construction workers came in, started tunneling out that hill. Well, that got me interested in AEC way back when I was still in mid school. After I finished my education in physics, I applied and had literature from Sandia Laboratories in Albuquerque. I applied there and got a job in 1956. Worked there 38 years in both the weapons work and in nuclear power. I really had 7 different careers in different organizations during that time. I retired at the end of the Cold War in 1994, and I went to volunteering at the museum 21 years ago. The museum now is seeing about 57,000 people a year. I'm there 2 days a week, so I've seen an awful lot of people come through the museum at the time. Got a lot of attitudes expressed to me about the nature of nuclear power. The museum is in 3 areas. Our charter calls for us to address the whole breadth of nuclear science. 3 basic areas. One is weapons, or the history of the atom bomb. Most people come there to see that. It starts with the splitting of uranium nucleus, goes through the Manhattan Project, the Cold War, and our current weapons, the 2 bombs, B-1 and B-83 bombs. Another section is on nuclear medicine, and the 3rd section on nuclear power. And that's what I want to concentrate on in this podcast, is because there were 5 questions of the 50 that started a theme, actually 3 different themes. One is transition out of nuclear fuels and where are we headed. Another one is on safety of reactors. And the 3rd is on reactor waste. So I'm going to address all 3 of those. Our museum policy is that we try to stay neutral in these things. That's difficult to do when you got strong opinions like myself on one way or the other. We try to stay factual in facts that we believe to be true. We don't speculate, and we don't get into political sensitive areas. We try to stay away from those. We don't get into arguments with people. on who did this or who didn't do that. I'll start, I think, by taking a tour of the museum. As I mentioned, there were 3 parts, and I'm concentrating on nuclear power area. And we'll begin where we begin in the museum, and that is discussing the various sources of electricity. And we have 5 panels that talk about the different sources. And each of these panels have listed on them the pros and cons of each electric source. Rarely will you see in the media or anywhere both sides delivered.
Mm-hmm.
You either hear a rant one way pro or the other way con.
Yeah.
So very seldom do you see both of them in conjunction. I'll start with fossil fuels. The numbers that I'll be giving you are out of the Energy Information Agency, EIA, updated March 20th. The fossil fuel panel is 61% of our electrical power right now is being generated by fossil fuels. But within that, the mix has changed. Coal is going down and natural gas usage is going up. Right now, 38% of the energy is being delivered by natural gas. 23% now is coal. Mm-hmm. At one time, it was reversed. But natural gas is taking over. It's become more available. It's cheaper, and now is economically ahead of coal. And primarily due to fracturing, which is a controversial topic in itself, but it has really released a lot more gas. The next panel in is nuclear. I won't say much about it right now because most of my talk is going to be about nuclear, but it's providing 20% of our electrical power. So between the two, we're up to around 81%. The next panel is wind. And wind is contributing right now about 7% of our electrical power and is rising faster than the next panel, solar. Solar is just a little less than 2%. Total of the two are about 9%. The 5th panel then has to do with hydroelectric. That's the power from the big dams. Mm-hmm. That's about 7% of our total generating power. But that is capped. I doubt if we'll ever build another large generating dam as those in the TVA projects or Hoover Dam or Grand Coulee. Mm-hmm. Those are probably history as far as the future. But they'll be there for on beyond our lives. But not probably more than 7%. When we look at those, the hype that you see is for renewable. Renewable is 3. It's the wind, solar, and it's not mentioned. Hydroelectric is renewable, 7%. When I have classes of kids coming through, I always mention to them that, well, with wind and solar, you got to remember the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine.
Yeah.
So what do you do to control what's called base power? Base power is what's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it needs to be reliable. Right now, there are 3 sources of the 5. That's fossil fuels, nuclear, or hydroelectric. Mm-hmm. And it looks like fossil fuels are going to be going away. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But remember, base power. Now in the renewables area, there's discussions this week, and they get into the politics of it, that, well, renewable and solar will become 24-hour sources because of battery technology. And I have my concerns about that, but let's go on. I'll give you my personal opinion. I've got to mention this. So, can you imagine New York City, the size of the battery building that would take enough electrical power to power New York City for maybe a 2 or 3 day storm that comes through, where the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine? That may be a real problem.
Yeah.
Well, I try to digress there, which I shouldn't. Anyway, fossil fuels really, though, are limited in the future, either because of the environmental impacts, the emissions, the people that want to see all that go away. But fossil fuels are really limited. Someday we're going to dig up all the coal, we're going to use all the gas, and then what's left? It's either wind, solar, combined with batteries, hydro, or nuclear. So right now, looking forward, I put my money on nuclear.
Yeah.
It really is the only 24-hour, 7-day-a-week reliable. Our reactors today now operate 93% of the time. They're very reliable. And I'm going to be talking quite a bit about those. At the museum, though, I'm really saddened by the people that come in and their ignorance on nuclear science. We don't teach it, and you don't really get a fair look at it by reading the newspapers or anything. I had a little old lady the other day that came in, and she asked me, "Are reactors safe?" And that really saddens me, because I said, "Well, you think they're unsafe?" "Yeah, they're unsafe." And I said, "Well, why?" And she said, "Well, Chernobyl."
Yeah.
I'm going to be addressing that a lot, because that is really, Chernobyl is really misleading.
Yeah.
And is an accident that should never be considered in looking at nuclear power. I'm going to address that more. The other thing is one of the questions. It's on your listing there. It's, let's see, I got to go back. Oh, it's 16A. Okay, 16A. You going to look it up there, Tom?
Yeah, I'm going to pull it up on my phone. 16A.
I'm curious about nuclear power, and if he has any insight on how to make nuclear a safer and more integral part of our power grid. Now, when I read that, I assume that writer thinks that current reactors are not safe and must be safe. These are all old reactors. We already have new designs which are much safer. But now when I say that, you will come out thinking, well, if they're safer, then our current ones aren't safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the current ones are extremely safe. See how that can be taken out of context?
Yeah.
So anyway, I want to address the area of safety. And, when the public looks at reactors, they think really of 3 accidents. That's Chernobyl, Fukushima, and 3 Mile Island. And very unfortunately, just when the whole development of nuclear power was about to take off, we had 3 Mile Island. We also had the movie China Syndrome, which did an awful, unfair, sick, fictional account of nuclear power. But it really swayed public opinion. All our reactors today are light water reactors, moderated light water reactors. Water is used for both cooling and for what is moderation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And what Chernobyl is and what are other reactors that we use to make plutonium. So let me talk a little bit about nuclear science. And this is as much as I'm going to lay on you, because you can easily get into things that make your eyes glaze over.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to keep it to a lay audience.
Okay.
One concept that is necessary in a reactor is to moderate neutrons. And what we mean by that is that when a nucleus of uranium splits, the neutrons coming out are very hot. They're very energetic. They're traveling about 2 million electron volts. They're going at about 11% of the speed of light. So they're zipping out and they go flying right by another nucleus and they don't interact. Somehow you got to slow those critters down.
Uh-huh.
And you do it by, like a pool table. You send them out and they bump into other nuclei.
Hmm.
And each time they bump into it, they lose kinetic energy and slow up. So after they bumped into other nuclei about 60 times, they're now down to a low enough velocity that they can interact with other nuclei. And the problem with that, though, is that these ones they bump into can't absorb it.
Mm-hmm.
They've got to bounce in and bounce off. And there are two materials that work best on that. One is graphite and the other is heavy water or deuterium, those two products. Now, right before World War II there, the Germans had deuterium, and they were trying to slow these down using deuterium. We had no deuterium in this country, but we had lots of graphite.
Mm-hmm.
So we used graphite. Fortunately, though, we also had an immigrant, Enrico Fermi, and he had discovered that process of moderation and how you had to slow it down. Actually got the Nobel Prize for it. He came to the United States and he and Leo Szilard developed Chicago Power 1, the first nuclear reactor. And in December 2nd, 1942, they got a sustained controlled chain reaction. Once that happened, we knew we could build a bomb. We had enough information to actually build an explosive with it. And so that really gave emphasis into the Manhattan Project. That CP1 reactor then was scaled up to a prototype at Oak Ridge called X10 Reactor. And that produced the first pieces of plutonium. To split out the feasible part of uranium is extremely difficult. They're called isotopes. They're the same, they're the same atomic number, but different atomic weight. The fissionable part of uranium is only 0.7%. 99% is non-fissionable. One is 235 and 238, difference in weights. That's only 1% difference. So you got to figure out a way of separating those.
Okay.
We tried centrifuges, which is what we use today. Westinghouse tried to build one. We didn't have the materials, though. We didn't have the machining capability to build these modern centrifuges. So they set that aside, and they went with two other concepts. One was electromagnetic separation, the other gaseous diffusion. I won't go into those. That'll glaze your eyes over. but there were two facilities built at Oak Ridge, one called Y12, the other K25, and one of the largest construction projects ever encountered. But they cranked away on uranium for 6 months and only had about enough uranium for fissionable uranium for one bomb. They knew that wouldn't work because the Japanese wouldn't give up on one bombing. But in the reactor, if you expose the uranium in a reactor, one of the daughter products is plutonium. You can take the plutonium out, you expose the rod, take the rod to a chemical laboratory, cut it up, and extract the plutonium out now chemically because it's a different element. It's instead of uranium at 92, it's now element 94. So you can do that. So we scaled up X10 at Oak Ridge, but then we had to get production level reactors, and those were done in Hanford, out in the east of Seattle. Built the big reactors out there, B reactor being the first, and that produced then enough plutonium for additional weapons. So anyway, those were graphite moderated reactors, all three of them. At about that same time, or a little later, well, it would be after, it's about after World War II ended, the Soviets also were using graphite reactors to make plutonium. And so they built one in more than one, I'm sure, in Ukraine, and they named it Chernobyl. Chernobyl was a graphite reactor and was being used both to produce plutonium for weapons and for producing electrical power. They used the excess power, put it on the grid, being used for two things. That was graphite. They had an experiment that they were conducting where they intentionally took the cooling water out to see what would happen. It got away from them and melted down. And that's the famous Chernobyl accident, which haunts us to today. Our reactors, and I'll talk a little bit later, have containment structures. I'll talk about that. I'll just set that up because they're very important in our current safety of our reactors. So right now, all ours are light water, like I say, either in designs that are pressure vessels or boiling water vessels, or they're deuterium. The only deuterium ones that are being built are in Canada, and they're called the CANDU series of reactors. We use water because it's much cheaper than deuterium. Deuterium is a very expensive material. Let me turn the page. I mentioned Chernobyl had no containment structure. Now, if you come to the museum, we have a cross-section of our confinement structures. It's 4 feet thick reinforced concrete. And we have a section in the museum that shows how large this vessel is, structure. In addition to that, there's several layers of steel too that confine them. That did not happen at Chernobyl. They built their reactor in a building that was designed to keep the weather out rather than keep any accident in. Talk a little bit about our current reactors because they're probably of greater prevalence than what most people think. As of now, we have 97 reactors operating in the States. And I saw just yesterday there are 34 now that have been retired. put on permanent retirement. But the 97 now are at 57 different sites. The biggest one being down west of Phoenix, the Palo Verde site. It has 3 reactors. Most of these reactors, though, were built in the late 60s, early 70s, before we had a moratorium on building them. So they're getting old. They were originally designed for about a 40-year life. They're now being extended and Band-Aids put on them. Most of them now are 60 years, but even at 60 years, by the year 2030, most of them will be being retired. And it's not because of the nuclear portion, it's because things just wear out.
Mm-hmm.
You got turbines, you got generators, you got plumbing, you got pumps. All these things eventually just wear out.
Yeah.
And it's no longer feasible to try to maintain them. The question then is, we have, well, there are also 438 reactors worldwide. A lot of them operating as long as ours. 438 reactors worldwide, 97 here. And they've been working all those years. Just think how many reactor years is involved there.
Yeah.
And we've had those 3 accidents, and one of them, Chernobyl, shouldn't even be considered because there are no graphite reactors now.
Yeah.
When I managed a group division at Sandia that reported to the vice president of the environment at Sandia. And he had an all hands meeting once and gave us a very profound thing that I see almost daily.
Yeah.
He said, unfortunately, we will spend our careers and our children will spend their careers determining how safe is safe and how secure is secure.
Yeah.
And we see that almost on a daily basis now. My big concern is that society seems to be tending towards zero risk.
Yeah. Which isn't
And
realistic.
it all depends on our tolerance for risk. Zero risk is impossible.
Yeah.
Everything is risk. Say, well, no, not if you don't get out of bed. Well, that's risky behavior.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of things. It's bed sores and everything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there is no saying it. But what are tolerance for risks? And in reactor now, right now, your risk, if you live within 1 mile of a reactor, your risk of dying from an accident at that reactor is 1 in a million per year. So some people look at it and say, geez, only 1 million, I'm moving.
Yeah.
But yet they'll go get on an airplane.
Yeah.
And they say, well, I got to fly because, I got to get there, but I'm scared of it.
Yeah.
Well, and we see this on the 737 MAX.
Yeah. The boat. Yeah.
Are people going to fly it after it comes back?
Yeah.
Are they going to be scared of it? Let's look at some of the numbers there. This is FAA, and you can go to FAA and get all kinds. They've got bushels of data thing. But there are 44,600 flights per day domestically in the U.S. They're carrying 2.7 million passengers per day. When can you remember that our last accident that killed somebody in the air?
Exactly.
We're getting what?
That's what I was going to say. That makes perfect sense because think of how frequent car accidents are. They don't make the news because they happen every day, everywhere. Planes, it happens so infrequently that it's news. Same thing with nuclear reactors. Yeah.
Bad things are news.
Yeah.
Okay. And you led me to my best next. Well, okay, I'm not going to fly. I'm going to drive.
Yeah.
So let's say I'm driving from Albuquerque to Dallas, and not realizing because I'm afraid to fly, my risk of dying in a car accident is 750 times greater than flying. And so when you see that number, you say, well, maybe I better fly.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Yeah.
and it all depends on our tolerance for risk. Well, one of the links that one of your viewers was to, let's see, where was it? It's 4C on your listing.
Okay.
It's an article out of the Bulletin, which I really found interesting. It's public opinion on nuclear energy, what influences it. And I was surprised in that. I think the authors of that expected negative results. It turns out that it's around 60, 70% of Americans favor nuclear power. And that surprised me. But anyway, you can go to that link and see the results of their polling. So there is a positive attitude, even with all the negative publicity that nuclear gets.
Yeah.
All our current reactors are what's called Generation 2. Generation 1 reactors are all gone. They're in museums. They're or been torn down. All ours are second generation. The Fukushima was the second generation. It was a boiling water GE design. And we have cutaways of it at the museum. They're very safe. Of course, they didn't anticipate a tsunami there that went up 70 feet. They were only designed for about 30 feet.
Yeah.
Well, wipe things out.
Yeah.
What surprises me, though, that the Japanese are very disciplined in this sort of thing, but they hadn't been keeping the reactors up to date. Fortunately, in the United States, we have the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, NRC, that imposes if you have one problem at one reactor, all reactors have to be analyzed for that problem and corrected.
Wow. I don't know.
And that's what we did after Fukushima. All the plants that were on the seacoast were analyzed to see if they could withstand the worst tsunamis. So we go through that. So we keep updating these reactors as we get more information about them. What now is being used and built in the country are what we call Generation 3 Plus.
Okay.
And in the United States, that is the Westinghouse's AP1000. Now, these are safer. Now I'm in trouble, see.
Yeah.
These are safer than the current ones. And why? It's a very simple thing. Why they didn't think of this initially. Instead of these pumps that rely on electricity to pump the water into the reactor, when you have an accident, use a very simple thing. You just put a 300,000 gallon swimming pool on the roof, and if you have an accident, the water starts raining down, just like a sprinkler system in your house.
Yeah.
It doesn't require computers. It doesn't require people. It's automatic.
Uh-huh.
And so this is the AP1000, and there are a number of different companies around the world that are producing these. The biggest market for the AP1000 is in China. Actually, I didn't mention it, but China is producing about half the wind in the world. They have a very big wind effort there. Plus, they're building these reactors plus they're building a coal-fired power week.
Jeez.
So, and they use dirty coal, so that's a
Yeah.
problem in itself.
And they're built
So
in.
you don't we call this tank on roof. It's called passive cooling. So it doesn't require people and computers to get confused like they did at 3 Mile Island.
Mhm.
3 Mile Island probably is what killed our new developments, really. It killed no one. There was a release of some radioactive gas. The big problem with 3 Mile Island, as I see it, is that they evacuated an area of 10 miles around it.
Mhm.
And the trauma of the evacuation, and also at Chernobyl and Fukushima, is they're experiencing greater problems with the people that are evacuated than what the actual accident caused.
Mhm.
Let's turn to waste. Talk a little bit about waste.
All right.
If I haven't convinced you the reactors are saved by now,
Yeah.
you're don't bother me with some facts.
I
My
know.
mind's made. On the waste, then, the beauty of nuclear power is the reactors have zero emissions. They're completely clean. But you all know that the big problem is, what do we do with these spent fuel rods? They're very radioactive, and they have some naughty stuff in them, like cesium-137 and strontium-90,
Uh-huh.
that also plutonium, that are around for 30 years or more. I mean, 30 years, thousands of
Yeah.
years more.
Yeah.
So it's a big problem, and they're so radioactive that it's very hard to do. Well, what we're currently doing is we take the spent fuel rods and we put them in the swimming pools. You don't want to go swimming in there, but put them in pools of water for about 10 years until the radioactivity drops down to some manageable level. A beauty of half-lives of the radioactive elements is that the more radiation they give out, because they're faster decaying, it drops off very quickly.
Mhm.
But you still have the long-lived ones that are still a danger. You put it in water for about 10 years, and it drops down. Then you take it out and you put it into what's called dry storage. These are dry casts that are stored above ground. And that's what's happening now. These are being stored at each of the sites because we have no central place to store them. So you've got 59 sites that have these pools of water, plus you've got in total 76 storage sites. I mean, the total is 70. 76 minus 59 is what? Anyway, a number of storage sites.
17.
So they're being stored there. What's that?
17.
17?
Yeah.
17 storage. Yeah. So the stuff is stored out there. To me, it's vulnerable. It's vulnerable to the environment. It's also vulnerable to possible terrorist activity. I can't imagine what a terrorist could do with one of these big tasks that if they broke into it, they would get zapped. You wouldn't want to be around them.
Yeah.
We've been building, and I was part of this, and Sandia is a big part of the design, and that's Yucca Mountain.
Mhm.
Yucca Mountain is unique in that we've been working on it 30 years. We've spent $15 billion on it, and we can't use it. And to me, that breaks my heart because it is a beautiful facility,
Why can't
beautiful from a technology point of view.
Why can't they use it?
And the beauty of it is that it's not a burial facility, it's a storage facility. We can put those casts in, and if we want to in the future, extract them,
Mhm.
because someday we will be recycling these fuel rods.
Mhm.
96% of fuel rod can be recycled and that is really abuse. The French, Russians, British, Japan, they're all recycling theirs.
Mm-hmm.
We aren't. And the reason is back in the 70s, the Carter administration outlawed recycling because part of the 4% that's left is plutonium.
Mm-hmm.
Plutonium is used in weapons. So there was concern about proliferation, nuclear proliferation. So that executive order went into effect. The Reagan administration reversed that order, but yet now no one is willing to touch it. You got the not in my backyard problem, which you got with Yucca Mountain, and also the very high capital expense of building a recycling place. As far as Yucca Mountain goes, then I just mentioned that in Yucca Mountain, not in my backyard,
Yeah.
it really took a hit with a very influential senator from out there, Reed. He's now retired. But the concern was that Yucca Mountain is 85 miles from Las Vegas. And the concern out there is that that might negatively impact the people that go to Yucca Mountain if they knew they were within 85 miles of a dump, a waste dump.
Yeah.
I doubt too many people that go to Las Vegas
I don't think they
to
care.
gamble are too concerned about that being in a mountain 85 miles away. But
I think they're okay with the risk.
That okays the risk.
Yeah.
You'll see in the news in just the last few weeks where now I'm getting it because I got to use Trump's name. I'm getting into politics. They had started to start back up Yucca,
Mm-hmm.
and Trump has canceled that.
Why?
And I don't want to go there. It's probably political reasons.
Okay.
So anyway, right now Yucca Mountain is on hold, and we got the not in my backyard problem. So it's still a problem. They're hunting around in West Texas for a repository, another one in southeastern New Mexico, but that is going to be a problem of the future.
Have you ever read the book Raven Rock?
No.
It's a book by an author named Garrett Graff. It's about all the nuclear bunkers from FDR through the Obama administration. But they give a little history on like the nuclear tests back in the 50s. And it's funny that you're saying that not in my backyard, because in the 50s it was actually a selling point where if you came and you'd be able to wake up early, and they'd go have a drink in the morning with pancakes and eggs, and they said you could see the flash from over the mountains and hear the boom. And so people literally used to go there and be like, let's go watch an atomic bomb. And it's like, how the times have changed. Now, you can't have it near me versus like, let's wake up early, honey. Like, let's watch the bomb. It's, yeah.
And see, I've lived through that transition. So
yeah. It's.
I was 11 when we dropped the bombs in Japan, and I remember that like it was yesterday. So
Really,
from the time that World War II ended, now a lot of reversals and a lot of changes of attitude toward the field.
How did you find that? How did you find that out? Like I was 11 on 9/11. I was in 5th grade, and I remember it coming on the intercom. I remember they said, there was an attack in New York, and they didn't really tell us because they didn't want to scare us. But I was 11 years old then. You were 11. How did you find out? Was it in the news?
See, back then, there were about 600,000 people that somewhere in the United States worked on the Manhattan Project.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you might have been a machinist in Detroit,
mm-hmm.
and you were machining a part, but you didn't know what the part was for.
Yep.
Back then, even with 600,000 people involved in one way or another, it was kept secret.
Yeah.
Up until the headline came out that we had dropped an atomic bomb. Well, what is it? at that, if I did, I don't remember whether I did at 11. I
Yeah.
did on in school,
Yeah.
but when that was just, and well, we heard the atom bomb and it's going to end the war.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know if you still want to go into it. We can talk a little bit on the morality of dropping the bomb, which is one of the questions.
Absolutely.
I forget which question it is. So if you want to go on some more, we can talk about that.
Sure, absolutely. We can absolutely do that.
Yeah, let's see. What is it? It's
Let me try to find it.
it's somewhere in the middle here. It's also we can talk about fusion. Also talk about suitcase bomb if you want to too.
Absolutely. It's
Another question.
it's 7C. What is your moral stance? Is that it?
Well, the one that I was thinking about initially is the
give me 1 second.
no, it had to do with it had to do with see, I thought I'd marked it. Anyway, it had to do with dropping the bomb and the explanation of that on the dropping of the bomb.
Okay, give me 1 second, Mr. Hughes. I'm going to grab my iPad because I have it on there.
Okay.
Okay, found it. Number 11. Is that an obvious question? What is his opinion of the Nagasaki Hiroshima bombings?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we addressed that in the museum, the arguments on dropping the bomb. There were a number of different scenarios considered. One was to drop it on an unoccupied island. Another was to warn the population of a particular city and then give them time to get out of there and drop it there. Another one then is, and one that was used, to drop it on a occupied city, and with no advance notice. The problem with telling and giving, say, 48 hours notice that we're going to bomb your city, is that there were 500,000 Allied prisoners, 150,000 American prisoners in Japan. And they knew that once that was announced, they would just railroad our prisoners down into that area.
Oh, yeah.
So that we would be bombing our own people. So that one was set aside. The other one will take a bunch of diplomats out and to an unoccupied island and demonstrate it over the island. The problem there is that I wonder if you did that and it didn't work.
Yeah, I've said that before on this podcast, is we had enough fissile material for Trinity, for Nagasaki, Hiroshima, and there was one more, a core that wasn't used. That's only 4. You use 1 to test.
Yeah.
What happens if you bring 1 out?
Plutonium for.
Yeah.
We were producing enough. We were producing enough plutonium there for 1 bomb drop a week.
Oh, okay.
Next drop was scheduled for September 17th. See, no, I'm sorry, August the 17th.
Cool.
Anyway, we had enough plutonium.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, we had at that time. That's why we tested the plutonium bomb, is we had enough to test it, but that gets over into another PowerPoint presentation that I give on taking the atom bomb to war.
Yeah. So
But Truman had to make the decision on whether to drop the bomb, and the argument that I feel most strongly about and in favor of is that Secretary Stimson was Secretary of War, and he told Truman that, he said, "Mr. President, what will you tell the American public in your impeachment hearing in a couple of years if you had a bomb that could have ended the war and you chose not to use it, and we suffered 1 million casualties as a result?" Put yourself in that spot, and to me, it's a no-brainer.
Oh yeah,
we say in warfare, there's no black and whites. It seems like we don't have any black and whites to any middle ground today, and a lot of discussions, things are black and white. But there are different areas of gray, so you're in a position of picking the less of 2 evils.
Yeah,
the one you pick might be evil in itself, but it's less evil than the other evil.
Yeah, I mean, my dad's dad was being shipped over for the mainland invasion, and obviously he didn't.
Goodbye. You wouldn't be here today.
I wouldn't be here. That's the thing I always say is I have to argue for it. I wouldn't be. He was 18. He was cannon fodder. He would have been right in there, done. It's
well. Let me tell you why I think it was the best alternative.
Okay.
We were estimating about 1 million casualties if we invaded the homeland. What we didn't know and what we underestimated was their year-end capability. There are those that say, well, they were about to give up. No way would the Army give up. We saw that in Iwo Jima and Chernobyl. They fought down to the last man. My best friend just died about 10 years ago, and he was on the train from Europe to ship out of California. And everyone on the train said that once they left the coast of California, they'd never see the U.S. again. And he told me that several times over the years. Also, just before we closed the museum for the pandemic, a woman came in and she told me that story, that her grandfather was convinced that had he was in the Navy, would have been in the flotilla, that he would not come back. So one thing to do is to, if you have a person that is anti-bomb, anti-nuke, ask them if they had any relative, father or grandfather, that was in a combat unit, either in the Army, Navy, or Marines. And if they were, they would not come back. Now, the reason I say that is we had been fighting the Japanese at the various islands up through the Marianas and everything. In those islands, we were not fighting the Japanese best troops. We were fighting what you might call a National Guard, second order troops. Weren't the Imperial Guards or anything. And we always outnumbered them 2 or 3 to 1 when we invaded the island. We thought that the Japanese Air Force had been decimated, that they probably only had 2,000 aircraft left. They probably had no pilots. And their army was probably down to nothing. Or there was and I read the general's report on what the capabilities were. They had held back 1.7 million of their top troops. And we thought they were pretty well all gone to defend the homeland. They had been building aircraft. We thought they had about 2,000 aircraft. They'd been building kamikaze aircraft and hiding them. They had 12,500 kamikaze aircraft. We thought they had no pilots, but they were training pilots, very simple training. All you had to do is train them to take off and fly. You didn't have to train them to land.
Yep.
Because they're good.
Yeah.
They would have to land.
Not landing.
12,500. They had built 1,800 one-man submarines, kamikaze submarines.
Suicide torpedoes.
1,800. Our Navy flotilla going in was about 850 ships. This is the Olympia campaign, and it would be in several waves. We hear numbers like 850,000 troops going in. We had all these ships out there. From our experience at Okinawa, these kamikaze dive bombers were very effective. We lost a lot of Navy ships and personnel there. That would have been catastrophic. The areas that we were going to land on, it's on Honshu or Kaishu. Anyway, on where we were planning to land, they had hollowed out those hills as they had in Iwo Jima and Okinawa. Those two islands were actually Japanese islands. The rest of we had invaded, the Japanese had invaded. Mm-hmm. So they had tunneled and had emplacements like Okinawa and Iwo Jima. So it would have been slaughter. And they also had trained 28 million civilians to attack in waves.
Yep.
Using axes and pitchforks and pointed sticks.
Yep.
Can you imagine being a machine gunner and having these waves of people coming at you?
Yeah, that you have.
You'd run out of bullets and you're dead.
Yeah, they had 32.
So it would have been an unimaginable thing. Truman had fought in Europe, in France in World War I, and he had seen what the cost of dragging things out was. So I think he made of course, I'm conservative and a Republican. He's a Democrat.
Yeah.
My granddad hated him.
Yeah.
But I really give him credit for making decisions, and I think he made the correct one.
Absolutely. They were training children. They were training children to put bombs on their chest and crawl under American tanks.
Yeah.
They handed out something like 32 million bamboo sticks, sharpened bamboo sticks, and it was charge them and stab them until they shoot you. The idea that they were about to surrender it's based in nothing. It's not based in fact.
Well, the politicians were, and the emperor was, but not the army. They fought it right down to the end. We learned at Iwo Jima and Okinawa that they were going to die to the last man. We lost 30,000. Well, we had 30,000 casualties in Okinawa alone, and all but just a few Japanese surrendered, and that was because they had been shot up so that they were stretcher cases.
Yeah, I mean.
So anyway, I look back at that and lived through it, and we were so, we so hated the Japanese at that time that it's difficult to put that into words today. So hopefully, things really turned around. It was tough.
Yeah.
The another one that is There's one on Suitcase Bombs.
Yeah.
Are they our smallest bomb, and this is clear back in the 60s,
Davy Crockett.
is a Davy Crockett.
Yeah.
It uses a W-54 warhead. It's an implosion warhead. And it's in two forms. One is the Davy Crockett that's launched with a recoilless rifle. The other is a canister that's put in a backpack where a paratrooper can land and take it over and set it at a prime location somewhere and set a timer in it and take off. That weighs 58 pounds.
That is sneaky. That is sneaky.
So that's a suitcase bomb, right?
Oh, that is terrifying.
Any SEAL or Ranger could tote that around.
Oh yeah.
One in each hand.
Yeah, the green light.
So anyway, suitcase bombs, and that is a concern now on terrorist activity and everything, because even it's not a Hiroshima level explosion, but it's a big enough explosion to get your attention. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And I know what the yields are, but at the museum we do not discuss yields. So
okay.
You have to kind of guess yourself.
Okay, I was gonna ask you, but okay, I'll look it up myself. Yeah.
Well, it's well. See, now you got me in trouble. I can tell you a lot of this is on the you look it up. You can look up the B-61 bomb.
Oh yeah.
But I can't comment on it because that gives it some validity.
Yeah. Don't comment. I don't want you to get in trouble, Dwayne. Don't do it.
You take it.
Don't do it. I'll look it up and I'll add it in another podcast. Don't get in trouble.
Yeah, that's a different subject. But anyway, morale on what we did to Japan. I think I'm deeply religious, but even that. I think we were on the right side there. Yeah.
So do I. I think you probably saved a lot of Japanese lives as well.
Well, initially they said 3.5 million, but it would have been much more than that because the war would have drug on. And I'd guess probably 5 million or so if they did those human waves as they were.
Yeah, they weren't going to.
And then another thing, which I really hadn't thought of before, but would we have used a third bomb if we were losing? I hadn't thought of that before.
Yeah.
Now that would have been a decision there,
Yeah.
To take a defensive position where you're losing and drop a third one. Yeah. I'd have to think about that a while.
Yeah, because that's the other thing is like, what if we had not used the bombs and instead gone on with the land invasion? Well, we'd only lose so many soldiers before we'd pull out and then drop the bombs anyway, right? So it's either way. I don't think there was. I think that the greater evil was World War II, and the lesser evil was the bomb, and we used the lesser to defeat the evil, the larger. That's my humble opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. I go along with that.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. We've been at it.
Hour 15 minutes.
Well, that was okay.
Goes by.
I had thought initially I'd get these. The beauty of it, I've done enough research to do this, that I'm now going to do I have 6 PowerPoint 1-hour presentations that I give on the Manhattan Project. They were from Trinity to CP1, and so I'm going to turn this into a PowerPoint. It'll probably be 50 or 60, maybe 70 slides. So I'll put in the pictures and everything.
Oh yeah.
And then I haven't done one on nuclear power, see, so you gave me an idea there that
Good.
not doing anything else other than that.
Yeah, it's
Maybe I'll work on that.
nothing else to do but keep yourself busy. You gotta stay sane in
Yeah.
the pandemic. That's what I'm doing. I'm reading books nonstop. Got to keep the mind busy. Otherwise, you get stir crazy.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Oh, Mr. Hughes, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're quite welcome.
And
Like my main motivation at the museum is that if we don't teach history, it's going to repeat itself. It's that old adage.
yes, sir.
And I see people coming into the museum that have zero knowledge. And this link that we were talking about on attitudes toward the nuclear energy, turns out that they also have a poll depending on the person's knowledge of how much they know about nuclear energy. And they found that the more you know about it, the better you accept it.
Yeah.
And that's really an interesting particular link. I don't know, maybe you want to send out to the readers. And that is, it's in 4C there. It's at the bulletin.
Okay.
Really, that's really a good piece of information there.
Okay, I'll put that.
If you might look up that bulletin there.
Okay.
And read that. It's well done.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And surprising.
Well, because the more you read, it starts to become obvious that none of these things are perfect, but you start to realize that one of them is a lot less imperfect than the others, especially with climate change, with natural resource competition and scarcity. It starts to become very clear. You're like, oh, nuclear is the choice. You're right.
Well, the pro and cons of each source of electricity that I talked about. There is no silver bullet.
No.
Our position at the museum is we need to maximize the use of all energy sources to meet our future needs.
Yes, sir.
Right now, that includes fossil fuels.
Yeah, it's
In fact, I was going to say that back, and I forgot to say that. So you can take that and plug it into my talk. Appropriate.
Until we figure out fusion seems to be
okay. That's another question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I worked on fusion.
Oh, you did?
One of my high-fluting titles of one of my 7 careers was I was executive assistant to the vice president of research. Okay.
Oh, wow.
And that was back during the Reagan administration.
Okay.
And we were doing Star Wars. We had all kinds of wild things on Star Wars. But we also then was developing ICF, Inertial Confinement Fusion.
Yep.
That's one of 3 fusion attempts. One is tokamak, which is Russian, that is developed here in this country by Princeton. The other is by laser, and that's out at Lawrence Livermore. Laser, and the third then is the confinement. Well, in fusion, what they're attempting to do is take a pellet of deuterium and hitting it with such a energetic force, and you do that with lasers, or at Sandia, you're doing it with electron beams, and you're putting terawatts of electrons down onto a pea-sized piece of deuterium or something, trying to get it to fuse. The fusion we're talking about is trying to duplicate the internal makings of the sun.
Yeah.
And tokamak is a toroidal vessel that gets like a cyclotron. It gets everything moving so fast in there, and everything becomes a plasma. The problem with what you create is so hot that you can't find anything to contain it because it melts it.
Yeah.
So how do you contain it?
How do you contain the
And back when I worked that was in the mid 80s. and we were tracking up toward break even and making pretty good progress. And the thought then was have break even or have more output than we put into it in 30 years. That was the mid 80s.
Yeah, it's always
Now when you ask, it's 100 years.
yeah, it's
100 years we'll have it. Okay.
yeah.
The problem that I see is that we've got to discover a whole new technology that we know nothing about right now. It's kind of like an interesting area that I see is we only know about 10% of the mass of the universe. Where's the 90%? Is it
dark energy, dark matter? Yeah.
Dark mass?
Yeah. It's
Yeah, you're frozen up again.
Oh yeah, sorry, the internet's getting choppy.
So then it's I don't we'll see. We've gotten with ICF, we've gotten up to break even. Where instantaneously in like a trillionth of a second we equal what was input.
Yeah.
And those are terawatt levels of energy. But it's you got to figure out, well, now I did that once. I can reload everything and do it maybe once a day.
Yeah.
But how am I going to have enough ammunition going through that it can continuously develop a commercial power?
Yeah.
And that is a daunting engineering task, and one that's evaded us so far.
Yeah.
So my humble opinion is that we'll never see fusion. You know, they saw cold fusion up in Utah at the University of Utah.
Pons and Fleischmann.
And when that came out, we had, well, at Sandia, when I worked there, and now it was 7,000 employees. We had 2,200 PhDs, and that's about what we have today. And all of them in that field headed their labs to try to duplicate that experiment. So it was determined it was an instrumentation problem and not a real fact.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's
there's a saying I thought you might think is funny, and it's fusion is always 40 years away because that's the length of a career. You got to keep it on the table so that you can justify your salary.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then once you retire,
also
kick it away.
And you're seeing it now is that each generation has to relearn the problems of the past, and that is, if you don't teach history, it's going to repeat. Why in the pandemic now? Why didn't we remember the lessons of the 1918 flu pandemic?
Exactly right.
I'm sure there's a group of people that said, we'll never let this happen again. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to have all this stuff in storage, and if it comes again, we can hit it hard. Those people died.
Yep.
When I started in '56 at Sandia, and I was young, the youngest one in the groups, because most of the people working at Sandia on weapons were ex-World War II or Korean War veterans, okay? And so they came in, they were older than I was. I was the youngest in the groups. And they began to retire. And the concern was, well, when they retire, the technology will go with them, because you never have enough documentation to relive that. And so there was a concern that these young master's degree people that were coming in never felt the heat of the flesh on their face.
Yeah.
And until you witness that, you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
You don't know what you're building.
Yeah.
So there was great concern of guys that were retiring, knowing that they're leaving that legacy. And we see that over and over again, that just goes away because we don't study history.
Yeah.
I wish we in school, but I guess there are more things like basket weaving or something is more important or something.
Yeah. Oh,
Oh, one thing I forgot to
sure,
tell you.
sure.
And this start recording again. We'll put this back in the
Okay.
I want to show you the power of nuclear energy.
Mm-hmm.
I have here, and I'll show you. See if you can see it. Let's see where. Yeah, there it is.
I can see it.
Can you see it?
Yeah.
See right there? That's a fuel pellet. It's actually plastic, but that's a replica of a fuel pellet.
Okay.
Okay, now I don't know, you're reading this backwards.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In natural uranium, to have light water reactors modify, you can't use light water with natural uranium. You have to use an enriched, so we're enriching now with centrifuges, we're enriching uranium from 0.7% of uranium to 5%.
Mm-hmm.
So this whole thing is 5% fissionable, or U-235.
Okay.
So you think that would probably be about the size of a sesame seed if you put it together in there. In its lifetime of that pellet, it will be equivalent to 3 barrels of oil, or a ton of coal, or 17,000 cubic feet of natural gas is in that.
Wow.
These now are lined up in tubes in a reactor core, and the tubes are in a core. They're 12 to 14 feet long, depending on the design of the reactor. So you have these strung out in there. In a reactor core, you have a 16 or 1700 rods. So you multiply this times the length, and 1600. I did the calculation of this in a 12-foot rod, 1600 rods, and you get about 340,000 of these.
Okay. In
one. That builds in, and then I've got it here. This is by the American Nuclear Society. An 1,150 megawatt nuclear power plant can save 3,358,000 tons of coal per year in one reactor.
In one
so
reactor.
I'd like for you to put that in. I forgot.
Oh yeah, sure,
to put that in. Okay.
That is crazy.
It produces 8 billion kilowatt hours of electricity, enough to serve all the electrical power needs of a city of 684,000 people. That's one reactor. And we can't build them.
And we can't build them anymore. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
so that's what. Now, if you convert that over to wind turbines, wind turbine, the older varieties are about 1.5 megawatts. The bigger ones now are 2.5 megawatts. If you take the wind turbines at 1.5 megawatts, it takes 700 and some turbines to produce the energy of one reactor. Or if you take a big 250, 2.5 megawatt, it takes about, I think, 430 or something. I've done the division, but you think 700 wind turbines out there.
It's insane.
And land it takes and all.
And we're not building reactors.
Yeah.
That is, we should be.
Well,
and
we should be. Let me talk about the energy in a bomb.
Sure.
In this sack of sweet and low is 1 gram of matter.
Hold on, I can't see it. Bring it closer to the camera.
Okay.
Still can't see it.
How
There we
about
go.
that?
There we go.
Yeah, I'm right here.
Okay.
Well, it's a little is why. That's
Yeah.
the pink sweet and low.
Yeah.
In it is 1 gram.
Okay.
If I could take all that mass and convert to energy, you got that famous formula. What is it?
E equals
Einstein's
MC squared.
formula. E equals MC squared. If I can convert all that matter, I get 20 kilotons of TNT explosive reaction. So in the Fat Man bomb, it converted 1 gram of fissionable material into energy, 20 kilotons,
Good Lord.
20,000 tons out of 1 gram.
Good
So that's the multiplier. And the speed of light is squared is just non-intuitive. It's such a
180,000
big number.
a second squared. Yeah, it's
Speed of light. I studied that. I tried to duplicate the speed of light in 4 of us in college. It's a difficult thing to do, but it's 3 times 10 to the 8 meters per second. Well,
yeah.
10 to 8 meters is a long way.
Yeah, it's 670 million miles an hour.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's fun to do some of the arithmetic. Yeah. Okay, well, anything else? Questions? I'm glad you brought up a few of those afterthoughts because I had these and forgot to use them.
Do you think that we will construct nuclear reactors? Because right now China is building a lot of them. They're even working on their own fusion, where the rest of the world is doing ITER, ITER, and I think China's trying to make their own. Do you think the threat of a Chinese rise in nuclear power, do you think that would lead us to start constructing again?
I don't think somewhere along the line, I don't think we'll allow China to dominate.
I hope.
And whether to dominate us.
Yeah.
So that gets very well. It's the news daily, or if not hourly.
Yeah.
With economics and the COVID-19 and all that. But I'm very conservative. I'm nationalistic to the point. There is that camp though that are globalists.
Yeah.
And we see that, well, it's fine to be globalists and peace, but when it comes to push and pull, you tend to pull back.
Yeah, it's a zero-sum game.
And you tend to pull back and look at your natural interests rather national interests rather than global interests. So
yeah,
that is above my pay grade.
yeah, that's yeah.
It's China to me is a big threat. Yeah,
they're a huge threat.
There's one question in here that has to do what's the chances of a problem, or where is it's forget just how it was worded, but it was where do you think the next problem is? And to me, it's Iran to cause, and that's because that whole thing is, it's religious fervor. With the Russians, it was political, and there at least you can be rational. But when you get to the point of being willing to commit suicide, because there are 72 out there that virgins that are big glad.
Yeah, it's
my thoughts are, boy, you don't need many suicides, suicidal terrorists before you run out of virgins. So so they're limited on what they're ever be. Yeah, it's the global threat. Global threat is
Yeah.
well, what I closed here, let me read it to you.
Sure.
Or no, I didn't. I'd like for you to invite your audience that if they have any questions or comments about what was presented, to let you know, and we get back together and see if we
Absolutely.
can answer. Would you do that?
I would absolutely love that. Yeah, I can.
Well, and invite feedback. Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, I can.
and I'd be happy to try to, if I
Awesome.
can, give you further information.
Yes, sir.
Because
Thank you.
what we talked about here is just tip of information icebergs,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah, I would love to. I would love to. I'll send it out and I'll ask for feedback, for questions, and we can put it together and we can absolutely do another episode. I would love to.
Yeah. I'd like to see a version. I don't make it mandatory. It's really your call, but I would like to see it just to see what I said.
Oh, absolutely. Sure. Oh, sure. I'll upload it. I'll upload it for you to see first, and then you can.
The basic thing is I want to be sure there are no errors in it.
Sure. Yeah.
And we correct those errors before it goes out, because the museum, we like to put out things that we believe to be true and factual.
Sure.
And it's awfully easy to negate that.
Yeah. I'll upload a version for you, and I'll send it to you, and we can go back and you can see if there are any errors. And if there are errors, what we can do is we can put that in the description. We can say at this moment he said X, but he meant Y, or something like that. We can absolutely do that. All right.
Yeah.
Thank
Well,
you.
good talking to you.
You too, sir. Thank you so much for coming on here.
Yeah, if you wanted to podcast on some other question.
Thank you, sir.
Like I'm much more an expert on the Manhattan Project.
Okay.
I think I've answered all possible questions on the Manhattan Project.
Yeah. I will definitely.
Like I said, I've got six 1-hour PowerPoint presentations on different aspects. So I've got 6 hours of formal presentation on just the Manhattan Project. There's a lot of one of the biggest things, and that still blows my mind on the Manhattan Project, is from the time we started work at Los Alamos till we dropped the bomb was 28 months.
That's insane.
To try to figure out how they were able to do all that in a 28-month period.
The fear of extinction.
Blows my mind.
The fear of
Blows my
extinction
mind.
from Germany and Japan. Fear drives it.
Yeah. Oh well, we were highly motivated.
Yeah.
And motivation is one of the big things.
Absolutely.
And for society to set an objective that is so strong, it takes all this interplay and stuff out. You're going toward that goal. It doesn't matter whether you're black, white, Christian, non-Christian.
Yeah.
You're heading right into that goal.
Exactly.
And we sure had that during World War II. Yeah.
That's it. Absolutely. You have a good goal and you work towards it. Everything.
Yeah. One of my things that really hit me during World War II is that I walked in grade school now. So I was about 7 or so. I walked about a mile to grade school. And in Miamisburg, the houses were right down against the walk. You had the house, walk, and then what's called the Devil Strip, a little strip of grass, and then the street. So you walked right by the house, and if you had someone in the family, in the household, in the military, the mother's got a blue star, and that's where the Blue Star mothers come from. And so there were a number of houses along there that at the start of the war had these blue stars. As the war progresses, those became gold stars. Gold stars, the person was killed. And boy, that was,
Wow.
makes me tear up to today.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. We'll wrap. Yeah. I think it's completely fine to tear up about that. It's very real. Just because it's in the past, just because the pictures are black and white, it doesn't make it any less real. It's very real. My great uncle passed away several years ago. He was 18 years old on D-Day, storming Omaha Beach, survived and was in the FBI for 50 years. It's my uncle passed away in 2015.
You really had an angel on your shoulders if you got to Omaha Beach and lived.
Exactly. My other uncle's father was at the Battle of the Bulge. An uncle of mine that passed away in 2013 was drafted into Vietnam. That's why I have the American flag behind me. And I always say this, and people think I'm kidding, but I have the American flag because it's the fact that I have the luxury at 29 years old to say whatever I want freely and to not worry about an invading army is because of all the brave individuals that came before me. That's why I have this, is to remind me. Any episode,
backdrop.
Exactly. It's and that's why. So I think
one of my close friends was in the 3rd Cavalry. He was in a tank in Patton's group at the going to the Bulge. Patton counterattacked and saved really the turning of the whole thing. But he was in a tank crew, and the weather was bad, and they had stopped, and they all had dug foxholes, of course. And the sun had come out, and they were out there standing by their foxholes, and some fighters were coming in, and they thought they were ours. Well, it turned out they were German, and they started getting strafed. So he got the Purple Heart because he dove into his foxhole, but he had forgotten that he had found a glass bubble to keep the rain and stuff out, and he put it over the foxhole. And when he dove, he broke through the glass bubble he had, and he cut himself, so he got a Purple Heart for it. But he told that story like it was right down funny.
That's brilliant. That's what would happen to me. Yeah, everyone else would get injured, and then I'd hurt myself. That's probably what would happen to me.
Yeah.
Why'd you get a Purple Heart? Because I tripped.
Some don't talk about it.
Yeah.
You get Purple Hearts for a lot of reasons.
Yeah. Wow. That's brilliant. All right, Mr. Hughes, I've kept you for an hour.
Well, it's been fun. So.
It's been super fun. Thank you so much. I'll get some questions, and we can do that. I'd love to have you come on and just talk about the Manhattan Project, just everything you know. I would love to keep doing them. We just got to schedule it a week out so I can figure out what time, and I would absolutely love to.
Yeah, let's see if it's so. Yeah, I'd be glad to talk about it. And unless you see pictures like I have in the PowerPoint, it's it's really hard to describe what Los Alamos was like during the winter that they did the design of the bombs. What living conditions were like there, and until you see a car parked out there that had sunk into the mud where the tires were gone. It was mud. It was sitting. The chassis was sitting on the mud.
Mm-hmm.
Or you see pictures of the women hanging their clothes out on clotheslines out with snow on the ground, and those that really comes home.
Yeah,
and that's hard to describe, but it. the always
Dwayne, you still there? Dwayne?